Today's session, session 2, is about renters' rights, disaster, opportunistic, and advocating for the clients. Thousands of neighbors in rental agreements were devastated by the recent flooding. From deposit to leasing, maintenance repairs is critical for tenants and landlords to understand their responsibilities. And there are several things that a client should know in regards to what their rights are as renters. And some of the things that's very, very important to talk about is the fact that tenants has rights when it comes to leasing apartments and housing from private landlords, as well as leasing agents as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about evictions. In Louisiana, we have what they call two-part rent. We have month-to-month. Tenant landlords can evict tenants for no reason if it's a month-to-month lease. They can be evicted from month to month if there's no reason. The landlord can do it for no reason. But they have to give them a 10-day notice. And once they give them a 10-day notice, they have to, they can evict them within 10 days. But if the tenant breaks the lease, when for whatever reason, if they break it because they're not paying their rent, then the landlord gives them an eviction notice, which only gives them 5 days to move out. So we're looking at disasters, renters, and key terms and concepts to understand when renting and leasing property from private landlords as well as rental agents. Deposits is what a deposit is. There's a sum of money given to landlords to secure housing. Here in the state of Louisiana, there's no minimum amount or no maximum amount of deposit that the landlord can ask for. Lease rental agreement is a legal binding agreement between the landlord and the tenant. Always tell the tenant or the client to make sure they keep multiple copies. The reason for that is when they move into a house, they need to have a copy of their lease agreement to bring to the utility companies. A lease agreement has to go with them to the electric company and the water company. So I always tell them to make sure, keep multiple copies of the agreement. Fixed term is agreed upon by the landlord and the tenant, and that usually is about 1 year. Some landlords give 6 months agreement, some landlords give a year, and some give 2 years. I've never came across a lease that was more than 2 years. The renewal clause is really always included in the lease, and it automatically renews every year. A month-to-month lease, if not otherwise stated in the agreement, then it's automatically what they call a month-to-month lease. Disaster opportunism. Policies and practices that take advantage of people in situations within a disaster context. These are the landlords who will place tenants into a home that still has mold in it. The electrical outlets are not working. There's certain things in the house that are really not up to code because the landlords is just willing to rent it out because of the increase in rent. They want to be able to get that money quickly and get that rental payment quickly and get that deposit quickly. So when that happens, we have to be able to understand that when we do an inspection on a home, these are the things that we look for. We make sure that everything is in working order, the toilet flushes correctly, and we will look for everything that a tenant needs to be able to live comfortably in that home. Rentals, rights, and disasters. Notable Louisiana Civil Code, and they give you the section here, and they talk about what your rights are when renting, and what your rights are when there is a disaster in the area. And you look at the Civil Code, and Housing Authority will also help you with that. And Louisiana does not adhere to certain laws that are common in other states. Noticeably, no limit on deposit. We've already discussed that. Deposit, the rent could be $800, the deposit can be $1,000. Does not prohibit landlord retaliation for exercising rentals rights. No governance around circumstances for landlord entry of home. Landlords here in Louisiana can enter the home at any time, sometimes without even giving notice to the client, 24, 48-hour notice. So some landlords respect privacy of the tenants and some do not. So Louisiana Code, and the sections are listed below that you can look at and probably understand what your rights are when there is a disaster. Key terms and concepts. Landlord's obligation. The landlord has an obligation to deliver the property in agreed upon time in good condition. If the lease starts on the 3rd of the month, 6th of the month, the landlord have to have that property available in good condition on the 6th or whatever date that client moves into the house. The rent has to be prorated for the date that they move in. Maintain the property. The landlord has to maintain the property. Protect the tenant's right of peaceful possession. Refrain from making changes to the property. The landlord has the right to pay the taxes. If the landlord sells the property during the term of the lease, the new owner may change the lease terms or evict the tenant. So you have to look at different things that's located in the lease. You know, it has to be noted that if you have intentions upon selling the property, how can I protect my rights to maintain housing? Or if I've given you the deposit and I cannot remain in the home, will you be able to reimburse that property back, that rent, that deposit back to me? And these are the things that landlords and tenants should sit down and talk about. Tenants are obligated to pay the rent within the time frame stated on the lease agreement. Return the property in the same condition. I always tell them, when you go in, take pictures of the property. When you leave out, take pictures of the property. Landlords should notice the ordinary, the common wear and tear, but anything that's being altered in a more drastic situation, that tenant is responsible for the payment of the repairs of that. Not alter the premises without written consent. Say, for instance, if you want to put a nail in the wall to hang something, make sure you get permission from that landlord to do that. Allow the landlord to make the necessary repairs. If you got leakage in your sink in the kitchen, make sure you report that within a small amount of time so the landlord can have time to fix that, because a little leak can cause a great disaster in the home. Use the property for the purchase of which it was leased for. A lot of tenants, they feel that because they may be having a problem paying the rent, then they want to sublease the property, but that is something that cannot be done, because in your lease, if the lease states you cannot sublease, then you cannot have no one in that property but the people who have listed on the lease. Only the ones that's on the lease should be living in that property. How does the obligations and rights look or change in times of crisis, such as a disaster? If a natural disaster or damages occur on the property to the point that it is completely unusable, the lease is terminated. That's an automatic termination. The client is no longer required to pay rent to that landlord, and the landlord cannot say to you, well, we had a lease, you need to come and do what you need to do, okay? Some leases include a disaster clause, especially in areas where you get a lot of major flooding, in areas where you get a lot of hurricane areas, and here in New Orleans, we get a lot of that. And we can have a simple storm and we end up having to close down some streets because of flooding. The court may find that although a force majeure event occurs with frequency in any given instant, the event was beyond the reasonable control of the parties. So I guess what they're saying is the parties are not responsible for it, because Mother Nature is precisely that. Mother Nature will do what Mother Nature do. Historical infrastructure and social discrimination, unique disaster history, history of poor risk communication or incorrect communication information. The post-disaster relationship between landlord and tenant deserves special attention after a mass catastrophe. Unlike a contained event affecting leased premises, whereas the landlord could rebuild at a reasonable foreseeable cost, it is unknown, escalating rebuilding costs after continue to prevent some leases from fulfilling their obligations. This is from the American Bar Association. And this really happened in Katrina. We still, to this day, have houses that are abandoned and still haven't come back from Katrina. Rental property owners have not come back, have not sold the property, have not tried to fix the property up because of a lot of legal issues that may be going on. And we cannot, if it's a historical infrastructure, then we need permission to be able to change those infrastructures. And we have to go to the city to be able to get permission to do that. Is New Orleans safe? That's a good question. Is New Orleans safe from disasters? That is a good question that I cannot answer. If we look at New Orleans and look at how the erosion is coming about, then we can see that there's some parts of New Orleans that is not safe. Are we going to have hurricanes? Sure, we're going to always have hurricanes. Are we going to have flooding? Sure, we're going to always have flooding. But it's how you prepare yourself and understand what you need to do to be able to get out of the floods and get out of the city at the time that we know that something is coming toward us. So how fast the levees are eroding, that's something we cannot really pinpoint right now, but that's something the city is working on. And I'm sure they're working on that all over the city. And the pictures that you're looking at, this is this happened probably back in the 20s, but it's not a change from what we experienced at Katrina. That's not a change. High waters, up to 7 feet in homes, people trying to get through the roofs to get out of their homes. So it's the area that we're looking at. We have low areas, we have high areas. New Orleans is surrounded by water. So we just have to be mindful of where we are and what we need to do. The flood maps is something that you can look at, and it'd be in a green space where, you know, the whole city would be flooding, and the next day we look at it and it may not be. So it's what we have to look at on a regular daily basis. We need to be able to understand that New Orleans can flood at any time. At any time, it does not have to be a storm. It can just be heavy downpours, heavy rains. This is the picture you're looking at now is typical. Whenever the flood comes in, the houses float away. Buildings that were damaged but not destroyed are expensive to repair because increases in the cost of building materials. We had major building materials that had escalated in prices. And it was very, very hard for us to get a piece of sheetrock for the normal amount of what it was cost. It was a situation where we had to drive to Mississippi, we had to drive to Alabama just to get sheetrock to put on the walls. So when the city can't function, we as humans can't function. Disaster opportunism, why does it matter? That's a good question. Why does it matter? It matters because you have human lives that's at stake. Take advantage of those in their circumstances. Can affect recovery, sure it can. It can affect everyone in a negative way. Everyone go through some type of mental change during disasters. Everyone. We all went through negative disasters, negative efforts, negative change. I myself, along with my family, we slept in the parking lot at Albertsons in Baton Rouge because we couldn't find a room. So we spent a few nights in a parking lot. So I got to learn and experience what homelessness, what it is, what it was, what they go through. And sleeping on concrete during any time of the year, when it's summer or winter, it's really difficult. In disasters, the opportunity to forget. You do everything that you can to try to forget it. However, it will always be in the back of your mind. Whenever hurricane season comes around, you've got people who's struggling with PTSD. You've got families who's running around trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And it's always an opportunity that you may forget it, but it'll always be on your mind. Post-Harvey, 19 zip codes saw median rent increases of 10% or greater. Before Hurricane Katrina, you can rent a one-bedroom for $325, $350. Now a one-bedroom goes for $850, $844. That's a tremendous increase, which is greater than 10%. How do we house them? We can't house them because most people do not make that kind of money to be able to pay their rent. So we find agencies and organizations to help them with what they need. It's something that they have to understand and learn. This is a housing. Rent increase has truly, truly increased tremendously. Income has not increased. You can get a 3-bedroom for over $1,200. That's a lot of money to be able to put a roof over you and your family's head. That's a lot of money. In Houston, rentals post-Harvey increased by 10%. This was consistent across all square foot and bedroom categories. Same here in Louisiana. Same in Louisiana. What is it? Opportunism or economic force? It's something that we have to look at on a regular basis. Limited supply, limited demand. Where you have demand, you're going to have supply. Where you have supply, you're going to have demand. It's both. It's the prices are going up and it's constantly going up, constantly going up. And it's getting out of the affordable reach time. It's something that cannot be afforded by clients at this moment. Get rentals insurance. Seriously, get rentals insurance. You risk somebody breaking into your home and stealing you just went out and bought a nice TV. It can be whatever kind of TV you like. Somebody breaks in and see you bring that into your home. Get rentals insurance. No matter how flooded the places are, the landlords is just gonna build it up to where they believe is satisfactory, and they're gonna rent it out, and they're gonna rent it out for more money than we can possibly pay for it. Emergency ban on excessive rent increases take effect in 9 California counties after wildfires. It's happening all over in all states. Rent has increased tremendously. If you go to HUD's website, you'll see what the rents are today in regards to rent increases. HUD, here's the website here. HUD has shown that you're not going to find a 1-bedroom for less than $800. And depending on the area you look in, you can look at an increase $50 to $100, which will make it $900, $944. Tools for counseling for renters' rights. Address the post-disaster housing and related counseling needs of existing and new clients. HUD checklist for recovery, step-by-step counseling for clients who have lost their home in a disaster or who are struggling with rent. HUD has a checklist. Go to HUD's website and look at the checklist, and they'll help you counsel your client on their home and disasters and who and why they are struggling with the rent. Scam and fraud protection. Help them understand the fraud can come in and the scam can come in at any given time. When you put a deposit in a landlord's hand and he tell you he's going to come back with a key, he's scamming, he's frauding you. Make sure you sit down and understand that the home should be a home that is livable. Ask the landlord, can you see the home before you sign the lease? Look at rental insurance and things that of this nature. And when you look at a home that it may be a different situation during the day than it is at night. Look at what type of area that you're moving into. bugs and pets. You can look for homes, and when you do an inspection on the homes and you've got bugs and pests hanging around, you ask that landlord about it. And lead-based paint, that's something that you don't want to move into a home that has lead-based paint. Talk to the landlord, find out whether or not there is lead base in the paint or in lead base in the home. Here in New Orleans, we have old homes, and at one time, old homes were the paint were lead-based paint. So look at that. Landlord need to do a test to see if there's any lead base. Ask them to do that. They have to do that. That's a requirement. Any repairs, landlords should make repairs between 24 and 48 hours of any type of repair that's being reported. Security deposits. Make sure that the landlord understands that security deposits have to be returned to the tenant, and the security deposits are not to be used as last month's rent payment. And understand that there's normal wear and tear that will be included in the property, and make sure that the tenant and the client are really, really living in a safe home where they would love to raise their children and go out and sit on the porch and be able to talk to their neighbors. Okay, any questions so far? Next week, we're going to talk about low-income housing here in New Orleans, and talk about how low-income housing is effective as well as not effective